Hey, Victoria.
Hi.
So this is the Adibi IP group question and answer, Innovate Q&A, the daily question and answer show put on by the Adibi IP group. Today is the sixth episode. We've been going strong. We do this every day, every weekday, and we're deep here in quarantine mode, continuing to make content and work hard. Do you mind just giving us a quick recap of yesterday's episode?
Sure. Yesterday, we went over the broad question of what is a patent, and you kind of walked us through that so that everyone can understand. Um,
Yeah, interestingly, like, sorry to interrupt you, but interestingly, the one of the key things that I remembered later that I didn't mention that I think is really interesting is that a patent is also a story. So it starts from a problem. So there's some problem out in the world. And when an inventor invents something, what they've really done, he or she has actually solved an existing problem that either no one recognized or no one or that other people may have recognized the problem, but his or her solution was better. And so the patent, the document itself, is telling that story of here's this problem app that existed in the world, and this is how I solved it. And it's that story that really merits the grant of the patent of a patent from the patent office. And so from a higher level, more philosophical, it's a story. It's a problem solution story. So yeah, pretty cool.
mhm. So today, the question is, how do I know if my invention is patentable?
So this question is one that many people grapple with initially, and I will tell you right away that most engineers, what they end up doing, and most innovators, what they end up doing is as soon as the thought crosses their mind of a patent, what they often do is they often shut it down early on their own without getting any external feedback. What I've noticed is people that innovate, they tend to undervalue, they tend to devalue the worth of their idea and the possible impact that it might have. So I just want to say at the outset, it's really important at this step that you not jump to the conclusion that there's nothing special here. Everyone knows about this, or this isn't that big of a deal, or this is too simple to be patentable, or there's nothing here. You want to stay away from that initially. And the first thing that I think, the first consideration is really just let your idea breathe a little bit. Let it have a chance at life before you start knocking it down. But the question is, how do you know if your idea is patentable? Now, in order for it to be patentable, it has to be useful and it has to be new. And utility is much easier to show. So what I will say, and this kind of ties into the intro, but you remember when I was mentioning the problem solution? So if it solves a problem, it's most likely utility is probably not an issue at all. It's most likely you're not going to have to be concerned with the utility aspect of it. But novelty is tricky because there's a whole universe that exists around us, right? And the world is so large, so segmented that people are working on problems that we don't even know about, and people might actually be working on the very same problem that you're working on, but you'll never interact with them because the world is so huge and so massive and so expansive. So the point is that there's prior art out there. In other words, other existing, it can be papers, publications, blog posts, existing patents, published patent applications. There's all this material that exists around us. And that's all considered to be prior art. And in order for your invention to be patentable, you have to show that it's novel. In other words, that it hasn't been done before. It doesn't exist already in the sphere of prior art. I want to have additional videos on what prior art is because it's actually a huge part of intellectual property, and it's a huge part of what patent attorneys actually do is try to identify what prior art is, because it's a key component to being able to obtain a patent. And if you are able to obtain a patent and someone later comes up with prior art that no one knew about, that piece of prior art can be used to invalidate your already issued patent. So again, to recap, so it's useful and it's also novel, and it has to also be it also has to be non-obvious over what exists, over what the prior art. So if it would have been readily apparent to combine prior art components together to arrive at your invention, then that would theoretically not be a patentable invention. Now, let's get more practical though. So how do we actually identify whether or not our invention's patentable? So I've given you the high-level interpretation of the law: novelty, non-obvious, and useful. But from a practical perspective, I would say that the one thing to focus on is do research. So before you have invented something, you probably were faced with a problem, and you probably were already doing your own investigating, right? Because why would you spend resources in reinventing the wheel, so to speak? Why would you spend time and effort in trying to solve a problem that someone else already solved, already came up with a great solution that everyone is using, right? So I would say the first step to identifying whether or not your invention is patentable is to do some hardcore Google searching, search for similar problems. I would just type in your problem into Google and see what other people have approached the problem. And I would just go down the search results and try to identify how other people solve the problem. Because again, the flip side of the world being so expansive is that it's probably pretty likely that other people have also faced similar types of problems that you were facing before your invention. So I would say leveraging all the search tools that are out there to try to identify prior solutions to similar problems that you were solving is a great place to start. But in addition to using the search engines, another thing that you can do to try to identify whether or not your idea already exists out there is by going to uspto.gov. So uspto.gov and accessing the patent databases. Now, there's two databases that are of particular importance. So one is the database of published patent applications, and the other is the database of issued patents. And if you go to the uspto.gov site, you'll see a dropdown for searching patents. And you'll see that there's two options. One is for searching existing patents, and there's another option for searching published patents. So I would suggest also playing around with searching there and trying to identify whether or not something similar to what your invention is already exists. So, and that's the other thing. So that's what you're looking for when you're doing these searches, is you're trying to identify prior art that's very close to or similar to what you have come up with. Now, if you look at the results and they're seemingly different, if there's some element or component that isn't there in the prior art, or there's a step that you have that isn't in the prior art, that at least in the search results that you've identified, then that might be a good candidate. Now, what I would also suggest is that you try to involve a professional just to get another opinion on patentability. And a lot of patent attorneys will at least initially talk to you, at least for, I would say the most will usually talk to you for about 15 to 30 minutes, just so that you can pick their brain in terms of patentability and what they think about pursuing patent protection. But ultimately, it's really a question of whether or not it's useful, it's new and non-obvious over what already exists. And that's generally how you know whether or not your invention is patentable. And again, it's a little tricky because you're kind of left with all these search tools, but you may not know, just given what's out there, whether or not what you did is in fact patentable. But I would really focus on the differences. So I would focus on identifying, well, this company solved the problem in this way, but mine does it this way, and this is how it's different. Because that's ultimately what a patent professional is going to ask you, is they're going to want to really understand what the difference is between the prior art and what your invention is. And that is that gap, that difference, that is probably and most likely where the patentability lies. That will be where the possibility for obtaining a patent is, in that difference between what you've done and what has already been done before in the prior art. So I hope that's a helpful answer, Victoria.
Definitely.
Awesome. Awesome. And I want to make a lot more content around what prior art is. And then the big question also that I think, well, I'm sure will come up in future episodes is, my idea is patentable. Okay, is it worth the investment? That's also a very large question and a very important one. And it's one that professionals deal with all the time because there's a lot of resources involved in obtaining patent protection. So, well, great. Well, thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
I think this has been an awesome episode, and it's a really key question, and I'm looking forward to chopping and answering a lot more useful questions in the future.
Me too.
Send your questions to Victoria. Here, I'll drop her email down below. And again, we would love to field questions, any intellectual property related questions, send them Victoria's way. And we're also interested in possibly having guest speakers come on. So thank you.
Thank you.